I was terrified whenever I would do a speech, or I would be speaking somewhere or on TV, that somebody who knew my past would out me, that somebody would say, oh, but you don't know. And not for me, I was terrified that it would impact my kids. I mean, they were young and I was so afraid, terrified. I mean, I talk about in my book at one point, this one day, I had just come back from doing a speaking thing at a school. And I was walking through the grocery store with my sons, and this man walked by us and kind of looked at me funny. And my younger son was like, why is he looking at you? And I'm like, I don't know. And in my head, I'm thinking, does he think I'm someone else? Did I sleep with him? Like, literally, did he see me naked? Like, fear. And is he going to say something to me? Is he going to say something? Like, it was terrible. And this is years later. And I was carrying that with me. And I started to feel like I would be a fraud if I was talking about self-esteem when mine was still so low.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Marci Warhaft, on the Tour for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie. So if you like the show, don't forget to tell a friend, give it a 5-star rating and a review. You can always subscribe to it for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Radio FM, Amazon Music, or wherever you are listening to it from right now. The more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show, and it helps me in return. So I truly, truly appreciate it. So for Black Friday, I've partnered up with a company I've worked with before, where basically what they offer is that with a subscription of $49, you subscribe with them once. And for Black Friday, you get a whole bunch of workshops you can sign up to that are really heavily discounted. It's like a Black Friday deal. So for that partnership, I've given them my workshop, which is how to create your podcast concept and never run out of ideas, which also includes a bonus of microphones simplified. I just want to let you know about this too, because I want to extend this to you. I will include the link in the show notes on Tuesday, the 23rd of November. And that offer, that Black Friday deal, is valid from the 23rd to the 30th of November. But once you've signed up with them, subscribe with them, and they'll give you all the coupons from, including my workshop, plus all the other trainers' workshop. Once you get that coupon is valid for a whole year. So you don't have to go in and use it straight away, but the way to get that discount. So it's 80% discount for my workshop. I know that the other trainers are also giving a lot of discounts, like quite heavy discount. It's a typical Black Friday thing where it's like 1 week and then boom, it's gone. So for that workshop is normally £197, but you get 80% off it, which I believe sums up to like around 40 quid. So there you go. Now to today's episode. So today with Marci, who's a writer, body image activist, coach, we talk about how she lived a double life for many, many years. Like, she was the perfect wife, the perfect mom, or she was trying to be the perfect wife, perfect mom. But she was leading a double life, and that was consuming her with shame and guilt, which almost cost her life. So her story is about how to unshackle yourself from your mind's chains, being free, and truly explore who you are. And you may not be leading a double life the way that she did it. I did not live a double life the way that she did it, but I find that a lot of the themes behind how she felt is really relatable. I think a lot of us, sometimes we do go around with some secrets, skeletons, in that closet, and the burden of it is so much heavier than actually just coming out and saying it. But easier said than done, obviously. But I really hope you enjoyed it. I thought Marci is really, really lovely, and I really had a great time with her. So without further ado, let's begin. Hi, Marci. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk to you about what it was like to live a double life, coming out of it, and what life is like for you today. So I've always loved people with like an interesting story. They make for amazing interviews. And so I can't wait to dive into your story. So before we do that, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
So I'm Marci Warhaft. I live in Toronto, Canada. I am a writer and a body image activist and advocate, and a coach that helps people with their body image and also release shame and guilt to live their best lives.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. I mean, all of that is amazing, but I also like, especially like releasing shame and guilt. I find that that's kind of also like circles to the body image as well. It must be affecting that. So I think we're definitely going to talk a lot about shame and guilt when we start to go into your story. So I'm going to dive right into this.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So you wrote a memoir about living a double life. And so from what I understand is that by day you were trying to be this perfect housewife, perfect mother. So my question to you is, what did you do at night?
Well, my book is called The Good Stripper, a soccer mom's memoir of lies, loss, and lap dances. So part of my double life, part of it was that I would spend all my time with my children when they were awake. Mm-hmm. And then when they went to bed, I would work at a strip club where I danced naked for men. And then it ended up, after I did that, I continued the double life by trying to be the perfect mom, but also I was so void of my self-esteem that I was looking for validation sexually from other people. And that kept going, that kept the double life going.
So when you were having this double life, because you mentioned you have children, were you with somebody at the time?
I was married. So that's what's so bizarre.
Did they know?
He did know. He absolutely knew. Yeah. There were no secrets. I mean, that's the thing. There were secrets from everybody else, but that's what's so weird about my story, really, is that I wasn't a single parent. It wasn't something I was forced to do, but my life took this turn for years that led me to where I felt that this is what I needed to do.
Okay, so I wanna sort of like go back a little bit, because I'm trying to sort of like understand how, because obviously, like, you have your children, you have your husband, and he knows that you are, you're dancing at night in the strip club. And so what was that first step? Because obviously I'm assuming that's not like on the first day. Like it doesn't happen on the honeymoon night, or maybe it did, I don't know. But like, well, how did it start? How did that before all of a sudden, working?
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I mean, in a nutshell, I will say that, and then we can go into detail if you'd like. But in a nutshell, it was years of a multitude of different traumas that I experienced, and I went through different traumas without getting a second in between one to recover from one before I was hit with another one. And what happened was I went through something called traumatic overload. And I had just been through too much. My self-worth and my self-esteem was very low. My marriage had taken a turn where it wasn't abusive at all. And we, in some ways it was still good, but my husband at the time, I feel that he saw that I was in this very vulnerable state after all my trauma. I'd been through physical, emotional, psychological trauma. And I think he took advantage of that and wanted me to act out sexually. And that's how it started with, I think my kids were very, very young. I had a newborn. And I just felt at this point, I didn't have any family aside from him and my children. And I felt that if he saw me as a sexual being, that maybe that was all I was worth. And so we started acting out sexually together. And then there was a part of me that was like, well, if he doesn't care who I'm with, then I'm going to kind of go on my own. And the dancing part of it came as I felt I needed money for certain things and also to contribute to the household. I was a housewife, and I felt that was also kind of part of the low self-worth. I felt I wasn't doing enough. And so I wanted to contribute. I wanted money. I was also dealing with an eating disorder, and I needed the money to work with a trainer who promised to get my body looking good. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to take any money from my family. I also didn't want to get a job that was going to impact my family, in the sense that I wanted to be there for them all the time. I didn't want them to notice a change. And so I needed a job that was going to allow me to be with them all day until my kids went to bed. Then I would go to the club, and I would be at the club until maybe 4 a.m. I would come home. I would go to the gym, then the grocery store. The 24-hour grocery stores knew me. And then I would come home and have enough time to take a shower before my kids would get up.
Basically, so that's what I have, because I've got already tons of questions for you. But one of that, just sort of like I want to ask first before we go into the rest, is that when did you sleep? Because I understand the like doing things at night. So for example, I have a full-time job, so on the weekend I do my podcast and I teach podcast. You know what I mean? Like you have to make things work. Mm-hmm. But I do go to bed at night. Do you know what I mean? Like, and even now I'm exhausted, and I don't even have children. Okay, so like I don't understand, like how, because obviously you want to be there, but if you are not sleeping, because 4 a.m. like how was this every night? Like what's the logistics?
So there it was not healthy. And it's funny because that is one question I get a lot when I do book clubs, and their moms are always like, how did you do that? But I would go a couple of days without sleeping at all. And I think at the time I was so, it sounds crazy, but it really was a lot of the trauma, because at the time I didn't drink at all. I didn't have a sip of alcohol for the years that I was doing this. I didn't take a drug. It wasn't that. I was so concerned with my body, so I wouldn't do that. But it was almost like I was running on fumes. I'm sure people around me thought I was on something, because I had a ton of energy. I mean, it can only last for so long, but I mean, I was dancing a few nights a week. I wasn't there all the time.
So how long were you doing that for?
So the dancing was only a few months. Okay. So that part of it. And then, like I said, and that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was sort of how I was acting afterwards, how I acted out sexually afterwards. That was the worst part.
Yeah, you mentioned that even, like before going dancing, you mentioned about that you and him were acting out sexually together, and then now you just mentioned again about after the dancing that it was more, that was the bit that you sort of feel like that was the worst part for you in a way, was that the acting out sexually together afterwards as well. So what does that mean by acting out sexually together?
So together, the first thing was that he had wanted me to be with other people.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yeah. But that's also a fantasy. Like that's a kink. Like nowadays,
it's a fantasy, but I think often it should stay a fantasy. I think it wasn't what I wanted.
Not if it comes it has to be completely consensual. Like if it's wounded, and if it comes because he gets a kick out of it, and you feel like you should, that's not the way. That's not how. Yeah, that's not kink anymore. That's like
right. And that's the thing. I mean, I make it very, very clear that it's not, that I wasn't forced into anything. It wasn't that. But at the time, it had been brought up years earlier, and I had said no. And at this point, when it was brought up again, it was at that point where I was very vulnerable. And so this time I did. And then we went to swingers clubs for a little bit. Yeah. And there was that. But I did feel that he was very in control. I did feel that he chose who we were with. I felt that there was this, I felt like, maybe it's a male-female thing, I don't know, but he could compartmentalize. So he could be, where we could be this sexual couple and then be like the average Joe's kind of thing when other people are around. I had a hard time with that because I was still me. And I was struggling with that, and it was affecting my self-esteem, and I was getting attention outside of that. And I think because I felt very unloved at this point. I had already lost, my parents had died. My brother had died. Mm. I was estranged from my sister at that point. And so I all I had was him. Mm. And to me, I wasn't lovable anymore. I wasn't being protected. I wasn't being I just wasn't loved, but I was being desired. I was being, so I felt like, okay, I'll be the best mother, but then I'll find my validation sexually. And so I also have this defiant attitude of, if he doesn't care that I'm having sex with people, well, then I'm going to choose. And so I got to the point where I felt if not every time, but oftentimes if somebody was talking to me at a coffee place, or if I met someone somewhere and they showed me attention, then it would become sexual. And then the problem was, I didn't feel like a rock star because of it. It didn't make me feel good. It was such a weird catch-22 because I would feel like a bad person for doing it. And then to punish myself, I would do it more to prove to myself that I'm a bad person.
But you know what? It's funny because, like, it does make sense to me when you said that, that you're gonna choose, and it's sort of like it took a bit of an extreme in terms of like someone's giving you attention and then it turns into something sexual, which is not something that obviously that that's not is obviously it's not something that we go out like, if all of us every time we get attention it turns to sexual, like we'd never get any work done, right? So it's like
exactly.
Like, right? So but to me when you said it sort of made sense in that context, because it for you, I feel, now I'm not a therapist obviously, so I'm not I'm not allowed to say what I'm about to say, but to me it sounded like that was your first step to empowerment, because if you felt he was in control, if you felt you didn't have a choice of who the partners were, then you going, fuck you, I'm going to choose, like in your mind, then that's your first step to say, I'm in power here. I get to choose.
Well, it's funny because yes, absolutely. So
because you say you were never forced and you weren't, but there's such a thing as like, like, not, I don't want to go into like the dark side, but it's like, there's such a thing as, like informed consent. And the fact that, like you mentioned that being alone and not working as well, like I can totally understand how that impacts self-esteem. And if you're with someone who's quite strong, it can quickly, they can quickly like really take control to a deep level. And it's just, that's why it's so important that, like I think I'm so sorry I interrupted you, but I feel like this is so important, like that message, you coming out with this, because it is so not everyone needs it, but I feel like for me, being like working, because the pandemic, I lost my job and stuff, but like working again, being busy, obviously there has to be a limit, but like being busy working stuff has really helped with my self-esteem. And the way, if I was to date again, I don't fancy dating at the moment, but if I was dating it, like I would be from a much more empowered place than I was last year. And so I can only imagine if you're a housewife and you have kids, you're tired, and you have a husband. Like there's a lot going on. This has been going on for years. I can understand why that one step was the empowerment step. And I know it sounds weird, but I totally understand it.
Well, you know what it is? It's looking for this false sense of empowerment. So I would feel that briefly, because I almost felt like I almost felt like I was playing a role.
But it was more empowering than what was happening before. That's why that was like
it was kind of like this weird empowerment, because it really wasn't, because I felt that it was. I mean, I was saying yes to these men, and I felt like in that moment they thought I was, fantastic, and so that felt good. But then when it was over, I didn't feel good, and so it was very, very brief. But I was so detached from my body at that time. I was between the sex and the eating disorder. I always say I was simultaneously completely uber focused on my body while also being completely disconnected from it. And it's like you said, though, because I'd been through so much, and because I had lost really important people in my life at a young age, I didn't have that self-validation. I didn't have enough of where I can say, regardless of what's going on, regardless of how people see me, regardless if I'm not working or I'm not whatever, I'm good. I feel good about myself. That made me just constantly seek it elsewhere. And that, unfortunately, was the only place at that time where I thought I could get it. So it wasn't a safe place to be. And it certainly didn't end up being super empowering.
No, but but it's understandable. I feel, and
Mm-hmm.
in a weird way, that's also the place sometimes that performers are in, like actors, singers, and all of that, where their only validation comes from that success and the claps, and it becomes a
Mm-hmm.
weapon against them. Whereas
Right.
other performers would be like they feel like they have a full life, they feel very comfortable in themselves, and a flop does not mean the end of the world. They'll just pick themselves up, and
Right.
like it translates in many different ways, and for you it translated in that way. But yeah, the theme, is like that double life. And so like the dance, you were keeping that secret just your husband knew about that, and then
Mm-hmm.
obviously he knew about when you guys were like swinging and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but and he may or may not have known about the stuff that you were doing without him. But was all of that the only person who knew your husband, and you had to keep it secret to everyone else?
You mean, yeah, at the time,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think anybody, well, I think I had a friend at the time who knew a little bit about what was going on. No, I had a couple of friends. The thing is, one of my friends, for example, who knew some of it, not all of it, but she knew some of it. I mean, it was really tough for her because she didn't want to judge me. She knew what I had been through in my life and didn't want to judge me, but she'd say to me, I love you, but I'm terrified for you.
Right.
It's,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, I mean, I was putting myself at risk in so many ways. And so that was tough, but that was it. And look, anybody that I was involved with knew, but,
Right.
but as far as friends, like most of a family or, people at my kids' school, no one else knew.
Did you ever feel like you almost got caught? Like, like
I
a
did get
parent
caught.
at school? Right. Okay, go on.
I got caught.
Would you mind
So,
telling that?
no, I talk about it in my book. I always say it was the hardest chapter for me to write. I mean, there are a few chapters that are hard for different reasons. I write about losing my brother, which was devastating and still makes me cry. I write about losing my mom. I write about a time I was in the hospital for months. But there's one chapter I wrote it in one night because I didn't want to stay in that day for more than 24 hours. And it was brutal to write. And it was when I got caught, and it wasn't the dancing. It was with the promiscuity. And as crazy as this is, as my life has been, I talk about so my biggest shame, and I still find it hard to talk about. My biggest shame is that some of the men that I was with were married. And that's something that I will never feel comfortable. I forgive myself. I understand why I did it, but it'll never be okay with me that I hurt somebody else, that I took part in something that hurt someone else. I'm okay with not being okay with it. Like I'm okay that that'll always be a regret.
Yeah.
But the thing is, so what happened was, as crazy as this is, my routine in the morning at the time this is many, many years ago. So this is when you'd have a family computer, that you log on to. So every morning I'd get up very, very early, and maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would go down to the basement. I would check my emails, and then I would go to the gym because I was obsessed with the gym. And this one particular morning, got up, went to the computer, and there were 3 emails from 3 different wives.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, no, it was 2 wives and 1 husband saying she knows. And that was devastating. That changed everything. That changed everything.
So the wives, like, how did they even find out? Was it the husband told them, or?
Because I guess they didn't know how to delete messages.
Yeah.
But look, it stopped everything, so it's good. But yeah, I was through emails and text messages, I think, that they found out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously really tough to find out when your spouse is cheated. What did you do from there? Because like I heard you say, like, that put a stop to it. Because obviously the situation inside wasn't gone. Like, however you were feeling, that was seeking out that. How did you stop that? It's almost like, it feels like almost like an addiction, like, to be naughty.
Yeah, I wondered if it was. I wondered if it was. I called an addiction place because I did wonder if it was an addiction, but it wasn't. But it really was this huge slap in the face. That was this not even something. It was me realizing, okay, so this isn't, at that point, I didn't care that I was hurting myself. At that point, I felt like I deserved whatever came at me, but it really was this more than acknowledgement, but oh my God, I'm hurting other people. And I did not want to be that person ever. And so I remember I went upstairs and I told my husband, because he didn't know specifics, what was going on, but I told him, and his response wasn't great. And I mean, I'll leave that when people read my book to hear what his response was, but I will say that it wasn't what you'd think. And it made me feel worse. I thought he'd be angry
and he was happy about it.
No, but it was more of a, I just have to be careful what I say, but it was more of a, if you do this, I'll forgive you kind of a deal. If you do this for me, then I'll forgive you. So I definitely would have preferred him to be upset, but it just solidified or to me validated that I really wasn't worth much. But I remember calling, I was seeing a therapist at the time, and I remember leaving him messages saying, this is bad. Like I need help. And he'd said everything needs to stop, no strip clubs. Cause we were going to strip clubs even when I stopped working at them so no strip clubs, no swing, like everything has to stop. And I told my partner that, and he was like, no, he wasn't thrilled about it, but that was it. I was done. And we just stopped everything. And it was the catalyst for me to get healthy. I mean, I went into an eating disorder treatment program. I was on medication I had some really serious medical, I battled a very serious illness before this all happened. And so I had surgeries and I had chronic pain, and I was on heavy duty opiates for that. I got off everything. And that's but here's the thing. This isn't a story of things were good, things were bad, and then things were good. With me, it was things were good, things were bad, things were good, things were bad, then things were good. And so I got out of that. When I got out of the treatment center, and I became a very outspoken advocate about eating disorders, and especially with kids. And at the time, this is before Facebook, like Facebook was just starting. So people there was no outlet for people to talk about body positivity and things like that. And I didn't like what was being taught in schools about health. It was all about weight. And I didn't like the messages that kids were getting. And I would call up radio stations, and I would call up TV stations and send emails when I would see a message I didn't like, or I fought my kids' school about a program they brought in that I felt was promoting diet culture. And I sort of became the person that would talk about things on TV and in the media. And then I created a program that I brought to schools called Fit versus Fiction, talking about body image and self-esteem and eating disorders. And that was fantastic. I mean, I wrote a book for parents, and that was great. And things were okay. I mean, my relationship was okay. We had our kids to focus on.
You're still with your husband?
Still with him. Yeah. And our kids are very busy. And so we were able to focus on them and be fine together. It wasn't a bad relationship. I still carried resentment. I still felt hurt. I still would have loved to still didn't feel loved. It was difficult, but it was what I felt I needed to do. I was the mom, and this is, and everything was okay enough. It was okay enough. But then what happened was I ended up kind of relapsing from everything. It's not the sex, but back into my eating disorder and back to feeling worthless, because I had this fear. I had never dealt with that shame of the stuff that I had done. I had never dealt with the guilt. I was terrified whenever I would do a speech, or I would be speaking somewhere or on TV, that somebody who knew my past would out me, that somebody would say, oh, but you don't know. And not for me, I was terrified that it would impact my kids. I mean, they were young, and I was so afraid, terrified. I mean, I talk about in my book at one point, this one day, I had just come back from doing a speaking thing at a school. And I was walking through the grocery store with my sons, and this man walked by us and kind of looked at me funny. And my younger son was like, why is he looking at you? And I'm like, I don't know. And in my head, I'm thinking, does he think I'm someone else? Did I sleep with him? Like, literally, did he see me naked? Like, fear. And is he going to say something to me? Is he going to say something? Like, it was it was terrible. And this is years later. And I was carrying that with me. And I started to feel like I would be a fraud if I was talking about self-esteem when mine was still so low. And I hit a very, very, very low point. At this point, my marriage wasn't great. To other people, it seemed fine. I did feel completely unwanted and undervalued and unloved. I felt worthless. And I talk about how for a good year or two, I slept on the couch. And when my kids would get up, I would make sure to jump to the other side of the room every time I heard them, if they went to the bathroom or so they wouldn't see that I'd slept on the couch.
So you were still not sleeping right? Right.
Right. Still,
yes,
I'm about 27 years sleep deprived.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, we weren't sleeping together. And I would drive my kids to school, and on the way back home, I would contemplate driving my car into the underpass. And that happened every day for at least a year.
What does that mean, driving your car under the underpass? What's an underpass?
Well,
is it a bridge?
Yeah. So driving into the wall, into the concrete.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's because I felt like at that point that I was taking up space that I didn't deserve.
Right. Yeah.
That I was using resources I didn't reserve. And in the past, I would never think of doing it because I had a spectacular mother that I lost when I was 28 and pregnant. And I thought, I haven't recovered from that. And I didn't want them to not have a mom. But then it got to the point where I thought, well, maybe they'd be better off without me.
Yeah. But that's the thing with suicidal ideation. It's just you actually feel you're doing people a favor. So even if you thought you don't want to give them the pain, you think actually you being around is more. It's so twisted with suicide. It really, really, really is twisted. But it's good that you didn't do it, and you're here to be able to tell a story.
Well, that's it.
But it is really, it's people don't realize. I think people look at it and they go, I think when people, I feel like, I don't know, let me know if that's what you think, but I feel like when people don't get it, they don't know when they think that suicide is selfish or this or that, or attention seeking, all of that. There's a part of me, well, there's two things. One is like, well, you don't, you clearly don't understand. You're making a judgment of something you haven't experienced or felt. And two, I'm like, you're a lucky motherfucker.
Right.
To not know what that place is, what that feels like, that you feel that way, that you're such a burden. And I think as much as actually it does has given you, Marci, an understanding of life and of people and the depth and compassion of that, it's not something that you feel at the time, that those moments are, they're very dark. So, but people just don't get it. So
and it's funny because I remember, speaking to another therapist, and they said that I was never even diagnosed as being depressed. I was just super sad. So I think, wow, like that was bad. So I can't even imagine how sad, like to be that sad. It's a horrible. So I can't even imagine. But somebody said to me years later, which was a great point, is that it's not that it's selfish, but had I done it, then that I would have destined my children for that to be their story, that they would have to live for the rest of their lives having a mom. So but I'll tell you, and I talk about this in the book, the turning point for that. And that was only about 6 years ago. And the turning point was when I left. There was one day, again, I had made a decision not to drive my car into a wall. And I went to the grocery store. I was still dealing with my eating disorder. And I bought a bunch of food to binge on and cry. And then I figured I'd go home, cry, eat, fix myself, and pick up my kids. And I got to the checkout, and the woman said, that she was really tired, and I'm like, me too. And she was like, you're always so full of energy and light. And I'm like, who? What are you talking? What? And she kept saying that she always saw me there, and she found me luminescent. And I was like, who is she talking about? And it really messed me up. I remember I left there sobbing my eyes out, and I got home and I was putting the groceries away. I had the worst headache, blaring music through my headphones. And there was something when she said that, it made me think, you know what? She sees something there. Yeah. There's got to be a spark there that I thought was gone, but she sees it. So maybe this isn't where my story ends. Maybe there's something there worth fighting for. And I decided then to make a change. Now I don't think I did right away. Like, I don't think I left my marriage right away, but I knew I was in the process of making the change. I knew it was time to get stronger, to get healthy again. And again, got recovery from my eating disorder, started sleeping better, just started preparing myself for the move that I had to make. And then I did leave my marriage. And that is, again, when everything changed. And it was tough. I talk about also in the book how I was so dependent that when I left my marriage, I had never paid a bill in my life. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do anything for myself. I mean, there was a time when I wouldn't put gas in my car because I felt like I couldn't do it.
Listen, girl, I wish I did know how to pay a bill, because those bills.
I know.
I'm only messing about, but like, I'm just mean, it's like, oh my God, it's like they just want the payment every single time. It's
right. It's a scary thing though when you feel like everybody else. I mean, I left my marriage, I was 46, and I felt like everyone will say, "Oh, you're so strong, you've been through so much," and I'd say, "Yeah, I have." On the other hand, like I don't know how to do regular adult things. Like I had to learn how to do things that people had been doing. Forever. And that was really scary. I went into my bank and I said to the woman, I don't understand anything and I need to understand everything. So talk to me like I'm 10 years old.
Yeah.
You know? And that's exactly what it had to be. But I was so much more afraid of staying in this situation than I was of leaving. I felt like if I left, there was still possibility. And so that was when everything changed and stayed that way.
Is that when you decided to write a book?
No, so it was still
because at that point, are you still keeping it sort of all under wrap at that point?
Yes, yeah. There's still people. I mean, people obviously knew about the traumas I'd been through, most of them, but but people didn't know about the other stuff.
I want to ask you, like, what made you write the book? It was that like because I feel like coming out, it's almost like sometimes, like, if we just admit whatever, it means that no one else can call us out on it, and it's freeing.
Exactly, absolutely. Well, it was also, I think what had happened was, so in the process of figuring out who I was, because when I left my marriage, also at that point I didn't know who I was. I never went out with friends. I had to sort of figure out who I was as a person, as a woman, as I was starting to become empowered. And then I realized that, like a few years later, I realized that I was only living a partial life. I was only letting myself live a partial life. I mean, I'm a big personality, and I wasn't letting myself be fully me because I was still afraid of my past coming out. It was still holding me prisoner. Yeah. And I just got to this point where I was 49. I mean, I'm 51 now. I was 49 and I was coming to 50. And I thought, okay, I've got more years behind me than ahead of me. And if I don't start living my life now, what am I doing? And I don't know how much time I have. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. And I don't want, it's like you just said, nobody can shame you if you don't feel shame. If my secrets are out and I'm owning them and I'm forgiving myself, then nobody can hurt me with them. And I had a couple of friends who, like I said, knew, and they were telling me that my story could help people. And at the time you think, I don't think so, but they were like, just write it. And for years they were telling me that. And then I was just at a point where I felt the need to tell it all. I felt the need to live so authentically. I hate lies. I hate just pretense. I felt like, I don't know, there was something in me, and maybe part of it was that I was going to be turning 50, that I was just like, this is my time where I'm just going to put it all out there, and, who loves me is going to love me, and who doesn't love me isn't supposed to be there anyway. And I put it out, and I really, my sister, who I had a relationship with again, because we hadn't for a while, she was worried for me. I remember worried about some backlash, and I was prepared for that. I was prepared to be judged. I was prepared for people to shun me, but I was ready for it because I had forgiven myself. Writing the book really, it's funny because when you put something on paper, there were times, certain things where I kind of went, oh, well, now I know why I did that. or now I know why I felt that way. Now it's clear.
Yeah.
So I was able to forgive a lot. And it was when I was able to do that, what I realized was, so for all those years, I was afraid of being judged. All those years, I was afraid that it would negatively impact me if they came out. But what I realized was I was doing that to myself. I was the one judging myself. I was the one keeping myself from opportunities because of my past. So I had to stop doing that. And in releasing it, it's been unbelievably liberating. I mean, it's still a big deal. I mean, knowing that so much of your life is out there in such a way. But again, life is short, and I'm not bothered by being judged. And I find that it's actually connected me to people more than it disconnected.
Well, because other people can relate. And I think a lot of even though I haven't lived your life, there's a lot of things that you say that I'm like, yes, I understand. Like the whole, I'm going to be who I am, whoever, and I'm going to say really who I am, and those who like it, those who don't, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like you deselect naturally, like it's called natural selection, on the social level.
Absolutely.
And that's totally
exactly.
fine. And also this interesting thing, right? Because to me, like it's a lot to do with perception and where you are, what the intention or where you're coming from when you do certain things, right? So, because to me, there's nothing wrong with sex workers. I actually love sex workers. I love to interview sex workers, first of all. And a lot of them who've come on the show talk a lot, like they actually taught me about self-esteem, confidence, and not taking shit. And actually I was like, oh, I didn't see that one coming. And so I think it's like, but I think it's like they were coming from a different place when they went dancing or when they went into other types of stuff, right? So there's a wide range, right? But because you came from a different place, like it was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to, and I'm really enjoying this. And it didn't come from that inner place of choice, which is, I think it makes sense why, not to circle back too much, but like when you said, you felt empowered by making that choice of who you were sleeping with, even if it was like too fast, too much, too soon or whatever. But it felt at the time, even though it wasn't in the long run, it felt more empowering. And I think it's the fact that if you make a choice for yourself, not because you feel you have to, and it's not for validation, stuff like that. So that was the one thing. And it's like, because there's a lot of people who dance, go to the strip club. There's a lot of people who swing. A lot of people swing. There's no shame around it. I mean, they don't put it on their resume when they apply for a job. However, but it's like, but it's not something they go around feeling shame about necessarily. And that's the thing, is like, that's the main thing, is like, what's the place we do things from?
Exactly. And that's the thing, for sure. I mean, you have to, we met some couples who seem to have an incredible relationship, very loving relationship, and a respectful relationship. Yeah. So it really depends. Everybody's relationship is going to be different, and I don't judge anybody's relationship as long as it's working for both people. It seemed to be at first with us, and it wasn't. And I think when we talk about empowerment, I mean, it was a false sense of empowerment. And I think what I wish was so here I was in this sort of these sexual situations, and what I wish was that I took that empowerment, and instead of taking it in the direction of, well, I'm going to do what I want with my body and do things that weren't great, I wish instead it would have been, well, I'm going to take myself out of this situation. I wish the rebelliousness would have taken me out of the situation and said, I'm going to reclaim my body in a healthy way. But I didn't have the self-esteem for that. And I think the other thing. Yeah. No. And I think you said when people, certain parts of my book resonate with people, of course, people haven't had the same experience as me, but I've had a lot of loss. Like I said, I lost my mother, my father, my brother, miscarriages, and I lost stillborn. And I think, so people can relate to loss. People can relate to the body image, low self-esteem issues. People can relate to dysfunctional relationships. There are so many parts of it that people can relate to. And what I'm finding is, people reach out to me all the time, and it's to say, thank you for writing it because I feel less alone. And that is amazing, because I think the worst thing is when you're going through something, or you may have done something and you feel like you're the only one that's done it. then you feel like a terrible person. You feel like there's something wrong with you. As soon as you see somebody that you think is great and they say, oh, I've done this, you kind of go, oh, what? Oh,
Yeah.
so maybe it's not so crazy. Maybe I'm not. So my book is dedicated to anyone struggling to forgive themselves for the mistakes they made when they were just trying to survive. Because we're just doing our best. That's all we're doing. And and sometimes our best is fantastic, and sometimes it kind of sucks, but it's our best at that time. Mm-hmm. And we have to be patient with ourselves and kind and empathetic to ourselves.
So you mentioned about the amazing stuff like after effects of, writing a book and people reading it, reaching out, people's, resonating and feeling less alone and so on. And has there been anything that sort of you may have expected or not expected that come out of publishing that book?
For sure. I think when we say it's liberating, it's such it minimizes it, I think. I think there's a freedom that comes from really being so honest and putting yourself out there. It gives you the courage, and not only the courage, but I also had the desire to kind of go, what else is there about myself that I have yet to discover? What else? And what I discovered in the whole process was my sexuality. I've lived straight all my life, and it turns out I'm not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I don't identify as heterosexual anymore. And that was an interesting. Well, I mean, people who know me really well, it's not shocking. But for me to just over the last year or so to really acknowledge that part of me has been. I think it sounds so cliche, and I hate cliches, but I almost feel like I was this damaged puzzle piece that kept trying to fit myself into the puzzle and thinking there was something wrong with me. And then I realized, nope, I was just in the wrong puzzle.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And that has opened up a whole new world for me as well.
You're dating women? Is that what you're saying? Are you dating you have a girlfriend, a wife? Like what's the
situation?
I
did. I did have a girlfriend. No, I did. I did have a girlfriend. But we ended that recently. Okay. But a fantastic experience. And what it did do was it validated or reinforced that is where it's supposed to be. And I'll tell you, look, I've dated a lot of men, a wide selection and assortment of men. And after my marriage and it just never, and I apologize to anyone who may be listening that I dated. I always ended it. I always felt relief when I ended it. It just, something never really clicked with me. And I realized it got to the point where I was always kind of leaning that way towards women. And then it got to a point where I was like, no, that's it. I almost felt trapped. And I felt I couldn't make that change because I was older and it was COVID. And how am I going to, I didn't have the community. So I thought it's too late. And that kept me from coming out also because I just thought it's too late. And then it got to the point where I'm like, even if I never met anyone, I knew that I wasn't straight. And I knew that I didn't want to appear that way. So and it's very important because a lot of people I've told, mostly men would say, oh yeah, I get it. We're terrible. And it's like, it has nothing to do with men. Like it has nothing to do with men. It's not that I've been hurt by men and so I'm off them. It's not that. I mean, being with women isn't a consolation prize when it doesn't work out with men, Mm-hmm. It's just, I decided I did not want to date men anymore. That's not where I was supposed to be. There's a reason why it never felt right. And even if I never met a woman, then I'd rather be alone than trying to live a life that wasn't authentic. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm, who knows what it'll be, but it did, from my first date with a woman after coming out, I just knew that it felt completely different. So that's exciting.
What does that, can you explain a bit? Like, what do you mean? Like what was it that felt different for you?
It's a weird thing. It's God, again, I feel terrible for anyone I dated. But I remember when I would go out on dates with men, and if it was met them online or however, and I remember thinking every time I would go to meet somebody new, thinking like, shouldn't I be nervous or excited or something? Like I should feel something. And I never did. And I realized, because I was never going into it thinking, oh, maybe he's the one. It was more like, I'm going to go meet someone. Like, I like the idea of meeting new people and talking to people and hearing people's stories and hanging out. But there was always a bit of a disconnect. And then when I went out with the woman that I was dating, there was just this instant, I can't even explain it. It just felt good. It just felt really good. And I remember thinking, regardless of whatever happens, this is the best date ever. And it just really made me think like, oh, like I can never go back. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be. There's just for me, I just feel like there's this unspoken connection, and it won't be that way with every woman, but I mean, it just felt right. And there's no other way to kind of say it. It just, it felt right.
It's like, I was thinking about, when you say like, when you see something, you can't unsee it. Like, for example, sometimes like, patterns that we have in dating, for example, I'm thinking, but when I was hearing you speak now, I'm almost thinking like, yeah, once you felt it, you could not unfeel it.
Absolutely. Right? Because I had never felt like that. I won't accept anything less than that. I liked that I felt different. I liked that it was more me. Like, I was like, oh, I get to like, I do. Cause I used to wonder, like, am I cold? Like, I don't think I'm a cold person. I think I'm a very loving, warm person, but why am I feeling detached? Like, I was with somebody for quite a while that said it was always like I had one foot out the door. I didn't feel that way, but maybe I did, and whereas with this now, if I'm there, I'm there, but I still have more evolving to do. I joke when somebody says, oh, so what's next? I'm like, who knows? Life surprises me all the time. Every 6 months, I'm like, somewhere new, doing something. So I'm constantly evolving, but that's also what comes out of living authentically, right? It's like, I'm allowing myself to change and to learn and to grow and to not panic about things, the unknown. I feel like I've survived enough that I know that I can survive. And so I just take things a day at a time, and I give myself room to grow and evolve as I need to.
Well, maybe now is also your time to enjoy life, like, it sounds like you went through quite a lot of, turbulence and experience that, negative experience and of that. And I wonder if sometimes, for some, like, going through hardships in the first half or first quarter of life, and then you sort of like, when you go through all of that and you come out, at peace, it's almost like now you get to live life differently.
I'd like to. Who knows? I mean, I think I never take the easy road ever with anything for some reason.
I mean, I guess like the reason why I'm saying this is because I think, I mean, I'm 43 now. I just turned 43, and so like, you said like you near 50.
I'm 51 now.
Right, 51. So, and I feel like, this is usually the time where most people would experience losing parents for the first time, really bad illnesses, I see friends now, battling with terrible illnesses, things like that. And it's almost like, I
did that already.
Right, exactly. And it's like, now you get to be,
hopefully, I mean,
let's not jinx. I mean, touch wood. But it's like now you sort of get to arrive in this stage of life with more peace, and you arrive on this boat. That's it's less rocky.
It's still not. Yeah, I hope. I mean, I focus on what's in front of me, and there's still challenges and.
Of course, I mean, that's life. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm still learning, and I'm still things, there's still a lot that I have to kind of focus on and learn and build and grow. But I like, now the difference is I like who I am. I like the contribution I'm making to the world. I like the people that I'm connecting with, and that's important. And so if I can look at myself in the mirror and not be embarrassed and not be ashamed. And that's key. I think that's
huge.
Key.
I mean, that is huge. Yeah. And so what would you advise someone else who's in a situation where they may be hiding parts of themselves or living in a double life, like, you know, in the way that you were. And how, like, what would you say, like, to help them remove that shame or guilt that they're feeling? Is there anything is it possible to give any advice to someone?
I think the most important thing that I've absolutely learned is that the fear that we have around our secrets coming out is way worse than what happens when we actually let the secrets out. The fear of I'm telling you, that is what keeps us miserable. And that's what keeps us from living our lives. Once it's out there, again, you may lose a couple of people, but those are people that supported and loved you anyway. And what you'll get are the people who understand you or who need to know, who you are helping with sharing your secrets. So it is, I believe it can be challenging, but it is so worth it. And you owe it to yourself to free yourself of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, like, once you get the help you need or do the work you need to do to get to a better place. Also, I don't know if this is something that, I mean, I'd like to hear your thought on that, but like, I feel like the less, sorry, how do I phrase this in English? Like the less, I keep saying the less, that's not what I need to say, is that, like, the more you're in that good place, that good spot, or that you've done that work, other people's opinions about you or ideas of life, the less they matter. Like, they
100%.
It's almost like, you know, someone would be saying something. It's almost like now, I mean, it's like, I used to be very feisty, and I still have that side of me inside, but like, it's just more like, I know when to, you know, like, I sort of nurture her in a way, like, when it's good to, but now they're also, like, getting rid of, like, you know, needing people's, you know, I didn't realize, but I think for a long time, like, needing people's validation and approval. And now that I only need my own, and I look for the answers within as much as I can, you know, unless I get a professional help. But it's like, I feel that if there's sometimes even conversations, I'm like, before I would have, like, come in and, like, you know, thinking I was part of a debate and stuff when I wasn't. And actually now I'm like, I'm really happy to walk away from tons of conversation. I can literally, I'll just stay mute. And, you know, if I don't feel like that conversation is going to lead to anything constructive, because that person is not.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. You need to, you know where to save your energy for.
Exactly. Because, you know, that person is not interested in changing, or they're not interested in another input. They just want you to co-sign, and I'm not into co-signing anything.
Excellent. So, I love that.
And it's like, now, okay, this year I'm like, wow, I can really shut the fuck up a lot more than I should. I just, like, cannot.
I know,
like,
I do.
In a good way, in a good way.
Yeah, I totally get that. There are debates that I would get into, and for what? You're exhausting yourself for nothing. It's not going to change. But to your point about the stronger you get within yourself and not worrying about what other people say. I mean, I think that what I've realized also is that the tough part was going through the stuff that I went through. So I survived that. And so to be judged on what I did to get through it, that's not going to hurt me. No. The hard part was the losses I went through. The hard part was the betrayal. The hard part was the physical and emotional damage that I went through. And I survived that. So if somebody wants to judge me because the way I survived it wasn't pretty, well, that's on them. Yeah. That won't hurt me. If my traumas didn't destroy me, well, someone's opinion isn't going to destroy me either. And I had to start not judging myself. I was judging myself on how I survived instead of praising myself or being proud of myself for the fact that I survived.
Exactly.
And I think that that's what people have to do. Stop judging yourself for how you did it. Just be proud of yourself that you did it and that you made it to the other side.
And you know, I'm gonna say this before we round up, is that like, maybe, like, obviously sometimes it may feel it feels hard to, like, oh, well, how do I stop judging myself? How do I stop criticizing myself? Because, you know, we're all going around with these, like, crazy little voice in our mind, like, criticizing ourselves all the time in front of the mirror, outside, you know, whatever, you know, like, it can be constant for some people. So, but I feel like just try to notice, like, how often you judge other people. because I find like sometimes I even catch myself still today. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, I'll have a cast of judgment on someone, like it could be a colleague or something else. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I just did it again. And I think it's if you can stop yourself from like those little thoughts, like, it's easy to criticize or thinking that people have bad intention or that they're stupid or whatever it is. It's part of the human brain. It does it. But the more we become aware of it and go, wait, no, I don't know the situation. I don't know. And it's like, the more aware you are of it, hopefully the less you start to judge other people, because the more you judge other people, the more you are forcing yourself into a corner, judging yourself. Because if I'm judging someone else for sleeping around, for example, that means that if I meet someone and I'm feeling it in the moment and I'm like, I just want to rip your clothes off, I'm going to have to stop myself. So I'm like, wait, but now I'm that little slut that I was judging the other day.
Right.
But
I'll tell you something.
No, I mean, those are all hypothetical. I'm not saying that's what I did, but I'm just saying.
No.
But and that's the thing, is like, if we stop judging, all of a sudden we're going to start stopping judging ourselves, more and more. Like, it's going to be, we start to kind of free ourselves, because the more we judge someone, the more we are turning that lock onto a little prison cell in our mind of like keeping ourselves to a higher standard. That's impossible.
Absolutely. But here's the other thing that's interesting. Sometimes it's not criticizing for something bad. What I found is I've had a lot of people who will message me after they read the book, because I love to dance. And so I'll post videos dancing and just in my place or outside or in the woods. And I've had some people message me who say, oh, now I get it. I didn't get your dance videos before, but now, like, you've been through so much. And it's like, it's interesting that now they get it. They almost like they were judging me before because I was posting these. I mean, and look, I always say, like, I know I get a lot of messages from people who love the dancing because it makes them happy. But I know that there are also people going, oh God, again, she's doing that again. But the thing is, it's weird that they had to see that I had been through trauma in order for them to say, oh, it's okay that you dance now because you had bad stuff. So it's okay that because I always say I've cried enough tears. So when I want to dance, I'm going to dance. But why does that have to be a thing? Why couldn't, if anybody wants to share anything that brings them joy, why do we need to even criticize that?
Why do we need to know the backstory, right? It's like, but it's such a human thing. And I think if we can just like, there's this thing as well, like other people's judgment are free. Like it's free to judge someone. It's free to run your mouth. It's free to gossip. But do you know what I mean? Like, so we should not be putting so much weight on it. It's like, do what feels right for you. And if it comes from a place of like the right place, and that is, it's all about, I feel like part of the thematics today was like, really is like, you could be lap dancing for 30 years and have an incredible self-esteem and a very happy life and a happy husband. Or you could be doing it from a place that's not empowering, and then it becomes this weapon against yourself, right? And I think it's like with anything in life, you could be doing dancing videos on social media every single day because you need the validation, and it becomes a weapon against you. And if you don't have enough likes or enough comments, you become depressed. Or you could be doing dancing videos and share it because for you, it brings you joy and you want to spread that joy. So at the end of the day, people's judgment counts for shit because that was free. People's judgment are not paying your bills, right? They're not paying your bills. Running their mouth is certainly not making you happy. So, like, that's it. It's just
I don't wake up and think to myself, I'm not waking up every day and thinking, what am I going to do today to get strangers' approval? Like, I don't care.
And that's not easy because it's like I think a lot of people go around like that for a very long time.
100%. I consider myself very lucky that I truly don't care if people judge me. Like, I just don't. I don't. But it took a long time for me to get here. But almost half a century. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but that's okay. But I think, like, can I just ask you, I just want to ask you actually a last question before we round up with the finishing thoughts, is that, and now you may not be comfortable answering this, and you don't have to answer, and I'll just delete it from the recording. Now that your book is out, and I don't know if your children are now adults or teenagers, but are they aware that you've written a book? Like, how is that affecting them? Or
that was one thing that people who knew I was writing it, who knew part of my story, that was their main question was, what about your kids? And I they're older now, they're in their 20s, and I wouldn't have written it when they were younger. But they knew part of my story. They didn't know the dancing. They didn't know, obviously, the sex stuff. They didn't know any of that. And I waited a while before they knew I was writing a book. They didn't know what was going to be in it. And I told them before it came out. And I've told, one of my sons really they were both amazing. And they both told me that I have their support, and they've been fantastic. They're not going to read it. And I'd love for them to read it later.
Of course.
But it's not something that they have any interest in reading.
Most of us don't want to think about our parents having sex. I certainly don't.
Well, that's
so
exactly,
it's like, I'm saying,
exactly.
Like, I would never even write, like, I would never read it, like, if it was my mom. Not because there's any issue with it, but just because for me, I don't want to picture it, because it's the daughter. Do you know what I mean? It's got nothing to do with them 100%. Judging you. They don't.
It is. It's a very open, very raw. It is. I don't hold back in it.
But you told them they were aware there was things that were going to come
well,
out.
they had to look. The title gives everything. Gives some of it away too. And my younger son sort of just didn't. I don't think he's interested in knowing details. My older son wanted to know more, and so we had a conversation. I told him more that was in it, and just so he'd be prepared for what other people would say. And his thing was that it was interesting to hear about his parents as people. Not just as his parents, and he loves us both, as he should, and it doesn't change anything. He's not traumatized. My kids aren't traumatized by my story. It's not great to hear that I went through stuff, but both of them, their reaction was, when was it? Like, they knew nothing. Like, it wasn't that I was there for them. So I was hurting myself, and so I went to great pains that they would never feel it, that wouldn't impact them. So my younger son really was like, what, how many years? What do I don't, and my older son said, you keep saying you made mistakes, but you also said you want us to have a great life. We've had a great life. So maybe they weren't the mistakes that you thought they were.
Yeah. We're harder on ourselves.
We are harder. That was fantastic. So knowing that they don't judge me, they were the only people whose opinion mattered. Like, they were the only people that, if I lost everybody else in the world, but I had them, I would be okay. But at the same time, as much as I would never have wanted to lose them, I will say that I also really felt the need to release the book. I really felt the need to share it. I really felt that it could, after I wrote it, help somebody else. And so I was prepared for them to be mad at me. I thought, if they are going to be mad at me, either for stuff I did or just for talking about the stuff I did, I believed enough that even if they were temporarily angry at me, then at some point they would understand.
Yeah.
So but that goes back to what we talked about earlier. You have to be really, really strong within yourself, or at least I really had to get to the point. I could never have written it any time before I did. I had to be at the point where I could look at myself in the face and know, okay, you did the best you could, and you're a good person. Your intentions are good. I didn't write it to hurt anyone, to call anyone out. It was really, I fell in love with the truth, and that's all I can be. And if my kids learn anything from me, I mean, they're learning great things from their dad. And for me, they'll learn that they can be exactly who they are. And I hope that they feel supported enough for their entire lives to be exactly who they are, and not to worry about living up to anybody else's expectations.
I love that. So Marci, just want to say a big thank you for coming on. And I want to ask you the two final questions that I ask all of my guests. So okay. There are two. And the first one is, what do you wish you'd realized, but like on a really cellular level, not just knowing in theory, but like, what do you wish you'd realized, really understood at 18?
The importance of being independent. Mm-hmm. That would have changed my life. I lived way too dependent on other people. And that is still something that affects me today. So I really, really wish I would have understood the importance of being financially independent, just to know. I wish I would have made myself learn the things that bored me, like things about my car and things about, taxes. And, but that's a big, big thing that I would change, just to be more independent.
I love that. That's great. And the second one is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
I won't let anyone undervalue me. Like I will not. Well, I won't let anyone undervalue me. I won't let anyone question. I won't let anyone else make me question my worth.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I mean, you just said a mouthful. Yeah, totally. And so, Marci, could you please tell us, like, where can people find your book? Do you want people to connect with you? If so, how? And, how can they work with you? Give us all the good stuff.
Okay, so for my book, again, it's The Good Stripper, a soccer mom's memoir of lies, loss, and lap dances. And you can order it off of Amazon. I know it's in a few stores in the UK too, but I'm not sure which one's offhand. But Amazon is a good one. And it's hard copy or Kindle. You can reach me. Well, I have my website is in construction for my coaching, for my self-esteem coaching. But for now, the best thing is to just direct email me at Marci Warhaft. So MarciWarhaft at Rogers.com. So at ROGERS.com, Marci Warhaft at Rogers.com. And if you read my book, please message me and let me know what you think. But then I'm on all social media, and it's just my name, Marci Warhaft. You can find me Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok. And I still have my Fit versus Fiction website, a little outdated, but for my body image for kids, which is FITVSFICTION.com, fitversusfiction.com. But just reach out to me on social media or through email is the best.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Marci. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story with us, and that really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for chatting with me.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-ness.com, or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for This Shit Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.